Have you ever reached that moment when your words just stop? Not because you have nothing left to say, but because you realize no one is truly listening. You try to explain yourself again, carefully choosing every word, bending, softening, translating your truth so that others might finally understand you. But instead of peace, all you feel is exhaustion, the kind that seeps into your bones. And then something shifts. It is not rage, it is not bitterness, it is silence. A strange, terrifying calm that feels like the end of everything you once knew. But Carl Jung would tell you, this is not your collapse. It is your awakening. Because the moment you stop explaining, you stop abandoning yourself. You cross the invisible line between the person who pleases and the person who finally is. This is the threshold Jung called enantiodromia, when the soul, pushed to its extreme, reverses direction to heal itself. It feels terrifying because you are meeting a new version of you, one that no longer trades truth for harmony. Tonight, we will go into that silence, the silence that Jung believed is not a failure of empathy, but its highest evolution. Because sometimes, the most powerful sound you can make is the one where you say nothing at all. If this moment speaks to something deep inside you, if you've ever felt that quiet pull to stop explaining and finally come home to yourself, then stay close, subscribe, and let's keep exploring the hidden language of the mind together, the silence, the shadow, and the light that waits beyond it. There is a certain kind of exhaustion that no one warns you about. It does not come from work or sleepless nights. It comes from being misunderstood. You know that moment, don't you? When you're trying to explain yourself for what feels like the 100th time. Your voice trembles slightly. Your heart beats too fast. You feel that desperate need to be clear, to be kind, to be understood. You think, if I can just say this right, maybe they'll finally see me. But they don't. They never do. You can almost feel the air around you thicken with confusion, resistance, maybe even quiet judgment. So you try again and again. You reach for softer words, gentler tones, hoping to bridge the distance between your world and theirs. But the more you speak, the less of yourself remains in the conversation. That is the hidden fatigue of an empath. The quiet erosion of your own truth and the endless attempt to make others comfortable. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And perhaps that is why you keep explaining. Because to stop would mean facing yourself. Without permission, without approval, without translation, you are not angry. You are not bitter. You are simply tired. Tired in a way that sleep cannot fix. It's the kind of tired that comes from carrying too many emotions, too many misunderstandings, too many versions of yourself just to keep peace. Outside, the world hums, the refrigerator buzzes, a car passes, someone laughs in the distance. But none of it reaches you. Inside, your thoughts are louder than any sound. They race, they loop, they search for the right words, as if meaning alone could save you. You take a breath, trying to slow the noise, but the air feels heavy. You speak again, slower this time, more careful, and the silence that follows feels like rejection. You think of all the times you've explained yourself before, at work, when someone misunderstood your kindness as weakness, at home, when your calm was mistaken for distance, in love, when you apologized for feelings that weren't even yours to carry. Every time, you thought if you could just make them understand, everything would feel lighter. But it never does. Because explaining has become your way of surviving. It's how you keep the peace, how you manage the discomfort of others. You have turned understanding into a form of self-defense. And yet, beneath all those words, something inside you whispers, "This isn't peace. This is self-abandonment." Jung called this state participation mystique, a merging of boundaries so deep that you begin to feel what others feel, carry what others hide, and lose track of where you end and they begin. You sense their anger before it's spoken, their sadness before it's confessed. You translate every silence into something you must fix. And in doing so, you forget your own language. The over-explainer in you was born not from arrogance, but from empathy. You learned, perhaps too early, that connection often requires sacrifice. That if you want to be loved, you must first make yourself easy to love. So you learned how to smooth your edges, how to make your truth sound gentle, how to wrap your pain in careful sentences so no one else would feel uncomfortable. But the cost is steep, because every time you explain yourself to someone who isn't listening, you teach your soul that it must always earn its right to exist. And that's the kind of tired that eventually breaks something. Jung once wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." And this pain, the ache of over-explaining, is the sound of your consciousness waking up. Because deep down, you know this cannot continue. You can feel it tonight. The fatigue in your chest, the dry ache in your throat, the tremor of wanting to speak but having nothing left to say. It feels like standing in a storm of your own words. The wind howling with unfinished sentences, the rain tapping against the window like every unanswered message, every misunderstood intention. You reach for another explanation, but the words crumble in your mouth. There is nothing left to give. And then it happens. Something quiet, something strange, something that feels like the earth beneath your thoughts shifting. You stop talking, not out of anger, not out of defeat, but because something deeper than words rises to the surface. Something ancient and steady that whispers, "Enough." The silence that follows isn't empty, it's alive. It hums through your body like the stillness after thunder, like the moment the ocean withdraws to gather its next wave. For a heartbeat, you panic. The silence feels wrong, too still, too vulnerable. You wonder if you've lost something vital, if your kindness has gone cold. But no, Jung would tell you that this is not the death of empathy. It is its transformation. This is enantiodromia, the turning of opposites. When a pattern has reached its extreme, it collapses and reverses direction. Your endless giving becomes stillness. Your over-explaining becomes awareness. Your need to be understood becomes the quiet acceptance that you already are. Outside, the rain slows, the air cools. The world, for once, doesn't ask anything of you. You lean into the silence, unsure but curious. It feels like stepping into a dark room and realizing that the darkness isn't hostile. It's protective. It's waiting for you to stop moving so it can finally show you what's been there all along. You take another breath. It's deeper this time, slower. The noise inside begins to thin out, like fog touched by morning light. You don't have to fix this moment. You don't have to explain it. You only have to feel it. In this stillness, you start to see the truth Jung devoted his life to teaching. that real empathy does not come from dissolving into others, but from knowing yourself so completely that your presence becomes a mirror instead of a sacrifice. You remember his words? The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And perhaps this is how it begins, not with revelation, not with clarity, but with the courage to go silent. Your hands unclench, your shoulders drop. The echo of all your old explanations fades into the background. The night grows softer. Your heartbeat steadies, matching the rhythm of the quiet world outside. The waves inside you, once crashing and restless, begin to dissolve into mist, gentle, translucent, free. For the first time, you realize that silence is not the absence of connection. It is the beginning of a truer one. Because when the noise of over-explaining finally falls away, what remains is not emptiness. It is peace. And maybe that is what your soul has been trying to say all along. For a long moment after the noise fades, you just sit there, still, unsure, suspended between what was and what comes next. Your words have dissolved. Your breath feels different now, slower, heavier, almost sacred. The air in the room has changed too. It carries a weight, but not a burden, a quietness that feels both strange and alive. You are not angry anymore. You are not even sad. You are simply still. It is the kind of stillness that arrives after a storm, when the sky has stopped shouting, but the earth is still trembling softly underneath. Everything inside you has been rearranged by that silence. This calm is not comfortable. It feels foreign, almost eerie, like entering a room you used to know but now looks unfamiliar. You wonder if this is peace or emptiness, if you have lost something, or if something new is being born. Carl Jung would tell you that this moment is not avoidance. It is not repression. It is the psyche's way of healing itself. He called it enantiodromia, the law of opposites, the natural movement of the soul when one force has reached its limit and begins to turn into its opposite. You have given too much for too long, and now, without your permission, your mind and heart are finding equilibrium again. You have spent years in noise, explaining, accommodating, absorbing. Now, the other side of that motion has arrived. Withdrawal, quiet, rest. This is not the death of your empathy. It is its evolution. Imagine a lake after a storm. The waves that once raged and collided now settle, their surfaces smoothing until they reflect the sky above. You can still feel the depths below, dark, vast, unknowable, but on the surface, there is peace. That is your soul right now, a deep body of water that has finally stopped fighting the wind. You take a breath. The air feels cooler. For the first time in a long while, your body does not brace itself before speaking. There are no explanations forming in your mind, no rehearsed sentences looping in your chest. There is only the gentle rhythm of breathing in and breathing out. It feels almost wrong to be this calm. You've spent so long surviving through movement, through doing, giving, saying, that stillness feels unnatural, even dangerous. But Jung once wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." And sometimes, consciousness does not come with fire or lightning. It comes softly, disguised as quiet. You begin to realize this isn't numbness, it's clarity. The stillness is not hollow, it is spacious. It gives you room to exist without performing. This is the space where your psyche recalibrates, where it gathers the scattered parts of you that were lost in explanation. It's as if your mind, exhausted from trying to be understood, finally decides to understand itself. Jung called this process individuation, the journey toward becoming whole, toward integrating all the parts of who you are. And every journey toward wholeness begins in this eerie calm, in that pause after the chaos, when nothing seems to be happening, but everything inside you is quietly reorganizing. The silence feels different now. It's no longer the silence of absence, but of presence, of something vast watching over you. You begin to feel as if you're being held by the very thing that scared you moments ago. There's a strange tenderness in realizing that the world keeps turning, even when you stop explaining. The people who need your words will stay close. The ones who never listened will drift away. Both are part of the balance being restored. Outside, the faint hum of life continues. A car in the distance, a dog barking once, then fading. The night air seeps through the window, cool and clean. Everything feels softer, as if the universe has turned its volume down just for you. You close your eyes and see that lake again. Still, endless, untouched. In its mirror surface, the stars shimmer faintly, and for the first time, you notice your own reflection not as someone trying, but simply being. It's peaceful, it's unsettling, it's both. This is the paradox Jung spoke of, the coexistence of opposites within the self. He believed that the soul grows not by choosing one side, but by learning to hold both, to feel calm and uneasy, to be silent and alive, to be alone but not lonely. You let that idea settle into your chest. It feels like a truth you've always known but never trusted. That peace is not something you chase. It's something that finds you when you finally stop running. The stillness deepens. Every breath feels like a slow wave rolling through your body. The ache in your shoulders begins to release. The corners of your mind unclench. There's no urge to explain anymore, not to anyone, not even to yourself. You realize how much energy you've spent trying to make your life legible to others, how much beauty was lost in translation. But in this calm, words are no longer necessary. The truth is no longer something you speak. It's something you feel. And perhaps this is what Jung meant when he wrote, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." You have spent years looking outward for understanding, but now, in this strange, quiet pause, you are beginning to look inward. There is nothing to fix. There is nothing to prove. There is only this, the sound of your own breathing, the rhythm of your own existence, the simple miracle of being here at all. This calm may feel unfamiliar, but it is sacred. It is not the end of your empathy. It is the restoration of your boundaries. It is your soul reminding you that peace is not earned. It is remembered. You might be tempted to fill the silence again, to reach out, to clarify, to reassure. But resist the urge. Let the stillness do what your words could not. Because within this quiet lies the beginning of everything you have been searching for. Do not be afraid, a voice inside you murmurs. It is here, in this calm, that your soul begins to speak. You open your eyes. The world looks the same, but feels completely different. The chaos is gone, replaced by a quiet that seems to hum beneath the skin of reality. You smile, not because you understand everything now, but because you no longer need to. And as you breathe in again, deeply, gently, you realize something beautiful. This calm, eerie as it may be, is not the absence of life. It is the heartbeat of your awakening. When the stillness settles, something inside you begins to remember. You remember how you got here, to this exhaustion that masquerades as calm, to this life built on quiet endurance. You have always been the bridge, the one who stands between two sides, between chaos and understanding, between hearts that cannot quite meet. You sense the tension before others feel it. You step forward instinctively, trying to make things whole again. It happens everywhere, in families, in friendships, in love. You read the air like a map. You notice the change in tone, the flicker in someone's eyes, the heaviness that others miss. You translate moods before words arrive. You hold the weight of emotions that are not yours, carefully, invisibly, because someone has to keep the peace. Carl Jung would have called you a feeling type with introverted intuition, someone who experiences the world not through logic or impulse, but through subtle emotional resonance. You feel patterns in people. You sense what is hidden beneath what is said. You connect dots that others never notice, and you do it so naturally that it no longer feels like a skill. It feels like breathing. But what happens to the bridge when it never rests? What happens to the one who carries every crossing, every burden, every storm, yet never truly belongs to either side? You can feel that fatigue now. It's quiet, but deep. It's not the kind of tired that asks for sleep. It's the kind that asks for permission. Permission to stop holding everything together. You see, this is what it means to live as the bridge. You are always between worlds. You listen more than you speak. You understand more than you are understood. And while others find comfort in your steadiness, few ever think to ask what it costs you. Jung once wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." And so they come to you, the empath, the translator, the quiet one who listens so deeply that others mistake it for safety. They cross through you to reach themselves, and you let them, because helping them feels like purpose. But purpose can quietly become imprisonment. Each time you absorb someone's confusion, you dilute your own clarity. Each time you adjust your truth to make others comfortable, you drift a little further from yourself. You are the bridge that has held through countless emotional storms. The arguments smoothed over, the awkward silences filled, the hearts mended through your understanding. And yet, you have rarely been the one who gets to cross. Tonight, though, you begin to notice the cracks, not the kind that collapse a bridge, but the kind that let light through, the kind that whisper, "You were never meant to carry everyone." You take a slow breath. The air moves through you, like wind across old wood. You picture yourself, the bridge, stretching between two shores. One side is the world's chaos. The other is peace. For years, you have stood there, believing your only worth was in connecting them. But what if the bridge is allowed to rest? What if connection does not require constant sacrifice? Jung's teachings offer an answer. The greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown. You do not have to solve people anymore. You only have to outgrow the need to. This realization comes slowly, like dawn filtering through fog. You feel the tension in your body start to ease. The endless negotiation between empathy and exhaustion begins to loosen its grip. You realize that being the bridge has given you a rare gift, the ability to see both sides. You understand pain and hope, shadow and light, the parts of people they hide even from themselves. That is empathy in its highest form. But empathy was never meant to replace selfhood. Your compassion is not meant to dissolve you. It is meant to deepen you. There's a difference between feeling with others and feeling for them. Jung believed that mature empathy comes from conscious relation, from meeting others with awareness instead of absorption. And awareness requires distance, a sacred space where your soul can breathe. So you begin to step back, just slightly. You imagine standing on that bridge, but no longer stretched thin. You stand as the watcher, steady, grounded, seeing the flow of emotion pass beneath you without being swept away by it. The rain begins to fall in your mind, light, rhythmic, cleansing. You feel its coolness wash over your fatigue. Each drop seems to whisper a truth you had forgotten. You are not the connector. You are the center. You do not need to belong to either shore. You exist to witness the flow, to understand without losing yourself in the understanding. The image of the bridge softens now. It is still there, strong and weathered, but something about it has changed. It no longer feels burdened. It simply is. That is the transformation Jung spoke of, the shift from unconscious empathy to conscious being. You are learning what it means to love without absorbing, to help without erasing, to listen without disappearing. The world around you feels gentler. The sound of rain outside becomes a lullaby for the weary heart. You close your eyes and sense the rhythm of the water, the breathing of the earth. Everything is connected, but not everything must be carried. Your mind drifts to Jung's words once more. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And maybe this is the beginning of your light, not the kind that shines outward to fix others, but the kind that glows quietly within, steady and warm. You are still the bridge, but now you know where your foundation lies. It's not on either shore. It's in the still point within you, the place that no storm can shake. You breathe again, slow and deep. For the first time, the air feels lighter. You realize that your role was never to hold the world together. It was to understand it, and then to let it flow. The rain outside begins to fade, leaving behind a clean quietness, a moment of peace that feels earned. You are no longer the bridge that never rests. You are the soul that finally has. You have always felt it, that strange heaviness that seems to arrive before you can explain it. You walk into a room and suddenly your chest tightens. The air feels dense, the energy unsettled. No one has said a word, but you already know that something is wrong. Your mind begins to search for reasons. Did I do something? Did I say something? But deep down, you know this feeling is not yours. You are simply picking up the quiet storms that others leave unspoken. This is the unseen burden of sensitivity, what Carl Jung called participation mystique. It is the phenomenon of blurred boundaries between souls, a state in which the emotional borders between you and others become porous. Jung believed that in such moments, the unconscious of one person can infect another, not through malice, but through resonance. You do not choose this. You do not invite it. It simply happens because your inner landscape is wide open, tuned to every vibration around you. Jung once wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." And for people like you, people whose empathy runs deep, that reaction often becomes absorption. You don't just witness another's pain, you feel it, carry it, and sometimes mistake it for your own. The bridge you once were has now turned into a mirror. Every emotion reflected, every shadow absorbed, every unspoken tension captured in your body like static in the air. You walk through life as if made of glass, transparent, receptive, quietly trembling with other people's echoes. And though it feels noble, even spiritual, the cost is subtle but profound. Your own reflection begins to fade. It happens slowly. A friend vents about their fears, and you hold it. A colleague releases frustration, and you absorb it. A loved one withdraws, and you fill the silence with your worry. Each time, your inner boundaries thin, until one day, you cannot tell if the sadness you feel is yours or someone else's. This is the psychic infection, not a disease, but a deep confusion of identity, when empathy turns from connection into contagion. And yet, beneath that confusion lies a truth that Jung understood deeply. You are not carrying too much. You just have not yet learned where you end and the world begins. You sit quietly with that thought. It feels like a balm and a mirror at once. Because yes, you have spent years mistaking absorption for compassion. You have mistaken self-erasure for kindness. You have mistaken silence for strength. But the truth is, you are not here to heal everyone. You are here to remain whole enough to radiate calm without drowning in what is not yours. Imagine again the image of the moon. It does not shine by creating its own light. It reflects what it receives. The moon glows with borrowed brightness, sunlight reborn in silver. But when too many clouds crowd the sky, the moon dims, not because it has failed, but because it has absorbed too much shadow. You have lived like that moon, reflecting the grief of others, the unspoken weight of their fears, until your own light began to wane. Yet even that fading carries wisdom, because somewhere within it, your soul begins to ask the question you have avoided. Where do I end? That question marks the beginning of healing. You take a breath, deeper this time. The heaviness in your chest does not disappear, but it loosens. You start to recognize that not every emotion inside you belongs to you. Some are echoes, passing through like wind through open windows. Jung believed that true individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires a return to the self, a reclaiming of one's own psychic energy from the collective. He wrote, "Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration." You do not need to harden or close yourself to others. You simply need to know what belongs to you and what does not. That is the art of inner boundaries, soft, invisible, sacred. You begin to see that empathy without boundaries is not love. It is fusion. And fusion is not connection. It is confusion. True empathy allows you to stand beside someone in their pain without drowning in it. It allows you to see clearly, to respond wisely, to care without losing yourself in caring. You place your hand over your heart and whisper inwardly, "This is mine." You feel the rhythm beneath your fingers, steady, human, ancient. The body remembers what the mind forgets, that you exist beyond emotion. You are not the sadness you feel. You are the consciousness witnessing it. It's a gentle but radical shift. You no longer fight the emotions that move through you. You let them pass, as waves pass through open water. You learn to remain clear, not empty, open, but not exposed. And in that clarity, you start to sense something profound, that your empathy is not a curse. It is a calling. but it was never meant to consume you. To live consciously as an empath means to feel deeply, but not endlessly. It means to listen to the pain of others while still hearing the whisper of your own soul. It means to reflect light, but also to know when to rest in darkness. The image of the moon returns, luminous now, no longer burdened by borrowed sorrow. It shines, not by explaining, not by absorbing, but by simply existing. You realize that light can be gentle and firm at the same time. It can illuminate without losing itself. This is what Jung meant when he said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." And tonight, perhaps, what you choose to become is whole again. No longer a mirror for others, but a vessel for your own quiet truth. You breathe in deeply. You feel the air move through you, cleansing the residue of other people's storms. And as you exhale, you imagine returning their emotions, not with rejection, but with grace. You say silently, "This is not mine," and that is okay. The heaviness begins to fade, replaced by a strange, soothing lightness, as if your soul is finally reclaiming its shape. You sense your boundaries returning, soft but sure, like gentle lines drawn in sand. You are still compassionate. You are still kind. But now, you are no longer porous. You are whole. And as this understanding settles, you feel something ancient and tender awaken inside you. The part of you that has always known the truth. You were never meant to carry every storm. You were meant to be the calm that remembers itself in the rain. And so, quietly, beautifully, your soul begins to find its edges again. Something changes after the boundaries return. You begin to move differently, not outward, but inward. The air feels lighter now, yet there's a curious stillness following you, as if life itself is pausing to catch its breath. You have spent so long holding emotion, absorbing, reflecting, translating, that even calm feels foreign. But inside that calm, a new rhythm begins to stir. It is quiet, almost imperceptible at first, but it feels like a pulse coming from a deeper source. Carl Jung called this enantiodromia, the law of opposites. He wrote that every extreme sooner or later turns into its opposite. When one aspect of life reaches its peak, the psyche instinctively compensates by moving in the opposite direction. It is not punishment, but balance, the soul's way of protecting itself from collapse. For years, you lived in one extreme, giving too much, feeling too deeply, losing too easily. But now, something inside begins to turn. The motion that once pulled you toward others is drawing you back toward yourself. It feels strange, doesn't it? Almost like watching a candle burn all the way down. For so long, the flame danced brightly, giving light, warmth, and direction. But as the last of the wax melts away, the light doesn't vanish. It pulls inward, folding itself back into the wick. The glow fades not from weakness, but from completion. That is what this moment feels like. The light of your giving drawing back into the heart of your being. At first, there's confusion. You wonder if this withdrawal is wrong, if pulling away means you've become selfish or cold. But deep within, something whispers otherwise. The quiet you're entering isn't emptiness, it's restoration. Jung once said, "The pendulum of the mind oscillates between sense and nonsense, not between right and wrong." You are simply swinging back from one extreme to another, rediscovering equilibrium in the middle. There is no shame in this reversal. The psyche is self-regulating, It seeks harmony the way rivers seek the sea. When you have lived too long in noise, you are called back to silence. When you have burned too bright for others, your light must retreat to heal its source. You start to feel it happening, the shift from outer focus to inner observation. You listen differently now, not for what others feel, but for what your soul is saying beneath the quiet hum of thought. And what you hear is startlingly gentle. You have done enough. It is time to return home. For a moment, it almost feels like loss, as if the parts of you that once defined you are dissolving. But this is not destruction. It is alchemy. You are not losing your empathy. You are refining it. Jung wrote, "In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order." That is what enantiodromia reveals, that the breakdown is not the end, but the beginning of integration. The energy that once poured outward now flows back to its center, ready to rebuild in new form. You begin to see the symmetry in your own story. Every time you overextended, life eventually pulled you inward. Every time you lost yourself in others, solitude found you. Every time you tried to save, you were the one being saved. By stillness, by exhaustion, by the quiet wisdom of balance. You realize now that this law of opposites has always been at work within you. It is what brings growth after heartbreak, clarity after confusion, peace after chaos. The soul knows how to restore itself, even when you do not understand how. You close your eyes and picture that candle again. The room is dark now, but not empty. There's a soft afterglow hovering where the flame once was. You can almost feel the warmth still lingering in the air. Proof that endings are never absolute. They are transformations waiting to unfold. This is what Jung meant by enantiodromia, that when life pushes too far in one direction, the opposite arises naturally to heal the imbalance. When the conscious mind is overwhelmed, the unconscious steps in, bringing what was neglected into view. It is not chaos, it is correction. You think back to the over-explaining, the exhaustion, the noise. You remember how desperate you were to be understood, how much energy you gave away trying to stay connected. And now, in contrast, you understand why silence had to come. The pendulum had swung too far. The soul, in its infinite wisdom, intervened, pulling you back to equilibrium. There is something profoundly comforting about this realization. It means that even when you feel lost, life is guiding you back to center. Even when you think you're breaking, you are actually returning to balance. You breathe out slowly. The air feels softer now, lighter in your chest. You no longer resist the quiet. You let it cradle you like water. This stillness is not the end of your empathy. It is the beginning of self-awareness. You can finally see that silence was never your enemy. It was your medicine. In the language of the psyche, stillness is not death. It is the pause that allows rebirth. So when you feel the light withdraw, do not chase it. When words fall away, do not force them back. Let the cycle complete itself. Because as Jung wrote, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. The withdrawal you feel is not punishment. It is purification. It may feel like your world has dimmed, but what's really happening is that the flame is being protected, drawn inward to burn steadier, deeper, closer to truth. Outside, life continues. The faint hum of distant cars, the whisper of wind through trees. Inside, the world is slower, softer. You sense yourself as both the flame and the wax. burning and becoming, ending and beginning. You understand now? Silence is not the end. It is the soul's quiet act of preservation. And as you rest in that understanding, you realize something you never saw before. That every retreat you feared was not failure, but grace. The psyche, like nature, always seeks balance. And tonight, it has found you. You open your eyes to the dim light of your room, the faint pulse of your heartbeat echoing through your ribs. The air feels steady. You are not in the darkness. You are in the center. And from here, the next chapter of your becoming quietly begins. After the light retreats inward, what comes next is not chaos. It is quiet. And beneath that quiet, a strange numbness begins to unfold. At first, you might think something is wrong. The emotions that once rushed like rivers now move sluggishly, if at all. Where you once felt every vibration of the world, now there's only still water. You are not used to this kind of peace. It feels unnatural, even frightening, because for someone who has lived through constant intensity, the over-explaining, the absorbing, the endless empathy, the absence of emotion feels like a void. But Jung would say otherwise. He would tell you that what you are feeling is not the death of your emotional life, but the differentiation of your inner world. In his book, Modern Man in Search of a Soul, Jung described a patient, a woman who came to him not with grief or panic, but with what she called a deep emotional numbness. "I used to care so much," she told him, "but now I just don't. I'm not angry, I'm not sad, I just can't feel anything." To most people, this might sound like despair, the early echo of depression. But Jung recognized something else. This was the psyche's self-correcting mechanism, the soul protecting itself from further depletion. He understood that after years of emotional overextension, the mind must create distance to begin healing. He called it a stage of differentiation, the process by which the self begins to separate from the roles it has played, the feelings it has absorbed, and the expectations that once defined it. You are not shutting down, you are reorganizing. You are not breaking, you are rebalancing. This is what numbness really is. Not absence, but incubation. Imagine a tree in the middle of winter. Its branches are bare, its sap pulled deep into the roots. To the untrained eye, it looks lifeless, frozen, still, stripped of all vitality. But inside that silence, the tree is conserving energy, repairing, waiting for the perfect moment to bloom again. That is your soul right now. You are not deadened, you are dormant. Carl Jung once wrote, "The greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown." This phase, this numbness, is not about solving your pain. It's about outgrowing the part of you that believed pain was your purpose. You have been the caretaker, the listener, the bridge. You have lived in emotional high tides for so long that now the stillness feels unnatural. But you cannot heal in the same rhythm that hurt you. Healing has its own tempo. Slow, deliberate, almost invisible. There are days in this phase when you may wake up and feel nothing. The music that once moved you feels flat. The conversations that once thrilled you now feel distant. You might even miss your old intensity, that burning empathy that made you feel alive. But remember this: numbness is the body's way of saying, enough for now. It is a soft rebellion against constant stimulation. A quiet return to equilibrium. in the relations between the ego and the unconscious. Jung explained that the psyche, when overwhelmed by one-sided living, compensates by withdrawing energy from the conscious attitude. In other words, the very vitality that once fueled your emotions is now being drawn inward, toward healing, toward integration. That's why you feel empty, because all the energy you used to pour outward is now feeding the roots of your own becoming. This emptiness is not the absence of life. It is the soil preparing for spring. Let that thought settle in your body for a moment. Feel how gentle it is to allow yourself to not feel, to let stillness do what your effort never could. You do not have to force clarity. You do not have to chase meaning. You are allowed to rest in this soft gray space where nothing demands definition. Jung might call this a sacred withdrawal, the soul's instinct to retreat inward when the outer world becomes too loud. He once said, "In each of us, there's another whom we do not know. That other self, the one who exists beyond empathy, beyond exhaustion, is the one emerging now, quietly, from within. You might not recognize them yet. That's okay. You are meeting the version of you that doesn't need to explain, doesn't need to absorb, doesn't need to prove their goodness through suffering. They move slower, they breathe deeper. They understand that stillness is not failure, it's faith. Faith that even when nothing seems to be happening, everything is quietly being rebuilt. So you sit there, perhaps in your dimly lit room, perhaps under the hum of distant traffic or the soft whir of a ceiling fan, and you let yourself drift into this season of inner winter. No resistance, no guilt, just breath and patience. The numbness is not the end of your feeling. It is the beginning of your selfhood, because for the first time, you are feeling without merging. You are existing without performing. You are alive without needing to prove it. You have entered what Jung would call a transitional consciousness, the sacred in-between, where the old dissolves and the new has not yet formed. It is not comfortable, but it is necessary. And the discomfort you feel now is the tension of rebirth. Think again of the winter tree. It stands still, not because it has lost faith in spring, but because it knows the laws of its own rhythm. The tree does not rush the thaw, it trusts the process. You are learning to do the same. One morning, perhaps not soon, but inevitably, warmth will return. You will wake and realize that something subtle has shifted. The same light that once felt distant will find you again. But this time, it won't burn you. It will move through you gently, the way sunlight filters through clean water. And in that moment, you will understand the wisdom of the numbness. That it was never about emptiness at all. It was about creation. You were being rebuilt from the inside out. As Jung wrote, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. But pain, once endured with awareness, gives birth to clarity. And so, in this quiet, you are not vanishing, you are ripening. In this numbness, you are not broken. You are being rewoven into something whole. Let it happen. Let yourself be still. Let the roots drink deeply while the branches rest. Because even now, in this calm, colorless stretch of existence, your soul is alive, breathing beneath the frost. And somewhere beneath that still surface, life is already stirring again. In this stillness, you are healing. And in this healing, you are slowly, beautifully being reborn. After the numbness softens, something begins to stir again. Not chaos this time, but memory. memory of the words you used to speak, the long letters you wrote, the way you once believed that love was measured by how well you could make someone understand you. You remember sitting there in that familiar room, maybe with dim light spilling across the table, composing yet another message that tried to explain your heart. Every sentence carefully chosen, every emotion translated into logic, as if understanding could finally bring peace. But the silence that followed was always louder than your words. You spoke into that silence for years. You filled it with reasoning, compassion, context, thinking that if you could just phrase it perfectly, if you could just be clear enough, gentle enough, transparent enough, they would finally see you. But they never did. Carl Jung once wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." And so, perhaps what you were really seeking was not their understanding, but your own. Because what you thought was communication was, in truth, projective empathy. The unconscious projection of your inner goodness onto others, assuming that if you can love so deeply, they must be capable of the same. It's a beautiful belief, and it's also a painful one. You believed that love meant translation, that connection required explanation. You believed that if you could make someone understand your intention, your depth, your care, then love would survive misunderstanding. But that belief became your curse. It turned every relationship into a classroom and every argument into a lesson you had to teach. You became fluent in explaining pain, but you forgot how to receive peace. It is easy to confuse empathy with self-erasure. You told yourself that you were being patient, kind, understanding. But in truth, you were pouring your soul into a vessel that could not hold it. It's like carrying buckets of water through a desert, believing that if you keep giving, the ground will one day bloom. You forget that the one dying of thirst is you. And still, you keep pouring. That is the tragedy of the endless explainer, the one who cannot rest until every feeling has been translated, every conflict soothed, every silence filled. But there comes a moment, perhaps the one you're feeling now, when the words simply stop working. You realize that no amount of explaining can make someone see what they refuse to look at. Jung believed that this exhaustion, this breaking point, is the moment of awakening. He called it enantiodromia, the natural reversal of psychic energy, when what once extended outward turns inward, when giving transforms into withdrawal. You can feel it in your bones, that quiet resistance rising like a tide. You no longer want to explain. You no longer want to fix. You just want to breathe. And yet, a voice inside still whispers, "But if I stop explaining, won't I lose them?" That's the voice of fear, the echo of the old pattern that taught you love must be earned through clarity, through effort, through endless articulation. But here's what Jung would remind you. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. When you stop explaining, you begin to accept that your truth does not require approval to exist. You no longer chase comprehension. You cultivate authenticity. You no longer perform transparency. You live truth. This is what it means to step out of projective empathy. To stop assuming that others can or should meet you at the depth you inhabit. Not everyone can. Not everyone will. And that is not cruelty. It is simply reality. The empathy you've given so freely must now be redirected, not withdrawn in bitterness, but reclaimed in wisdom. You start to realize that empathy without boundaries is not compassion, it is depletion. There's a subtle difference between explaining and expressing. Explaining is performance. It demands understanding. Expressing is freedom. It releases what no longer needs to be held. You are learning the art of the latter. You sit with this understanding quietly, the way one sits with an old photograph, tenderly, without resentment. You see the version of yourself who kept trying, kept explaining, kept believing. You don't judge them. You thank them, because that version of you was love in motion. They didn't know any other way to connect, but now you do. Jung once wrote, "There can be no transforming of darkness into light and of apathy into movement without emotion. And emotion, when honored without explanation, becomes transformation." So you begin to practice a new kind of honesty, one that doesn't need to justify itself. You speak softly but directly. You state how you feel once clearly, and then you let it be. No persuading, no proving, no defending, just truth, still and steady, like water in a calm lake. And something miraculous happens. The people who are meant for you start to listen differently. They don't need paragraphs to understand you. They hear your silence and still feel your presence. Meanwhile, those who are attached to the old version of you, the over-explainer, the emotional interpreter, begin to drift away. Let them. Their absence is not loss. It is space. Space for peace. Space for reciprocity. Space for you. Because the truth is, your words were never the problem. Your compassion was never too much. You were simply offering both to people who were not ready to receive them. You take a slow breath, almost smiling at the realization. The air feels clearer now, lighter. You can sense the weight of years of explaining slipping off your shoulders like an old coat that no longer fits. You whisper inwardly, "I don't have to be understood to be at peace." And in that moment, a small but profound freedom takes root. You no longer need to pour yourself into the desert. You can drink from your own cup. You begin to understand that love, in its truest form, is not a lesson you must teach. It is a presence you embody. Jung wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." And maybe, after years of explaining yourself to others, it is time to listen inward. Because inside that quiet heart of yours, the one that has spoken so much for others, lies the simplest truth. You were never meant to explain your worth. You were meant to live it. So breathe deeply. Let the words fall away. The need to be understood dissolves, and what remains is what was always there, your presence, your wholeness, your light. And somewhere, deep within that stillness, a new kind of voice begins to rise. Not loud, not pleading, but calm and certain. It says simply, "You have nothing left to prove." And that, finally, is the beginning of peace. There comes a moment after all the explaining, the final word, the last attempt, the quiet realization that nothing more needs to be said. The air around you feels different now, lighter, almost sacred. You understand that your truth no longer depends on anyone else's comprehension. You breathe in, and for the first time, you feel no urge to clarify, no need to fix, the compulsion to over-explain, the fear of being misunderstood. They start to dissolve. What remains is something still and profound. Presence. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And becoming who you are often means letting your words rest. From this stillness arises what Jung might call the conscious relation, a connection that does not demand fusion, but honors difference. It is what happens when two individuals meet without losing themselves in one another, when empathy no longer requires erasure. The rule of the silent protocol is simple. Say it once, clearly, and then stop. No elaboration, no performance, no rescue mission for someone else's comfort. It sounds small, but it's revolutionary. You might say softly, "Perhaps we see this differently." And then you stop there. You don't rush to bridge the gap. You don't bend your truth into something more acceptable. You let the space between you and the other person breathe. Because in that space lies something precious, integrity. At first, it feels unnatural. Your instincts, trained by years of empathy, tell you to soften the silence, to offer more context, to make it easier for them. But now, you begin to understand that ease is not the same as truth. True connection does not grow from comfort. It grows from clarity. Jung believed that distance was an essential part of relationship. Without it, two psyches become enmeshed and individuality dissolves. He compared this to participation mystique, a state where emotional boundaries collapse. To counter this, he emphasized what he called proper distance, the respectful space that allows two consciousnesses to meet without merging. He once wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there's any reaction, both are transformed. But that transformation cannot happen when one dissolves into the other." So, the silent protocol is not withdrawal. It is respect for yourself and for the other person's journey. It says, "I trust you enough to let you think. I trust myself enough to stay silent." This silence is not cold. It's luminous, like the space between two candles burning side by side. Each flame bright, distinct, feeding its own fire, yet illuminating the same darkness. That is the essence of conscious relation. Two lights that coexist without consuming each other. You begin to feel this difference in your body. Your breath slows. The urge to fill every pause starts to fade. You notice how peace enters through the gaps where your explanations used to be. It's almost meditative, this way of communicating. You speak only when there's something real to say, and when you do, your words carry weight. They're no longer frantic or apologetic. They're calm, like stones placed carefully in a river. And then you let the current do the rest. You see, the old version of you believed that silence meant failure, that if you didn't explain yourself enough, you'd be misunderstood, abandoned, or dismissed. But now you understand that silence can be an act of love, not a withdrawal from connection, but an invitation for it to evolve. Because when you stop explaining, you give others the chance to meet you halfway. Jung wrote, "What you resist persists." The more you fought to be understood, the more resistance you met. But now, by letting go, you allow understanding to unfold naturally, or not at all. Either way, you remain at peace. This is what maturity feels like. A quiet trust in your own clarity. You start to notice something subtle. The people who are meant to stay in your life begin to lean in. They listen more closely. They feel the gravity of your stillness. They realize that your silence isn't rejection, it's presence. The ones who thrive on your over-explaining, your constant validation, they pull away, and you let them. Because this time, you're no longer chasing connection that demands self-sacrifice. You're cultivating connection that honors authenticity. The silent protocol teaches that not every misunderstanding must be resolved, and not every silence must be filled. Some spaces are meant to remain open, like the pause between breaths or the stillness between ocean waves. And just like the ocean, your empathy finds a new rhythm. Ebb and flow, give and return. When you speak, it's no longer out of obligation. It's out of awareness. You choose your words like a craftsman chooses clay, shaped by intention, not compulsion. You begin to notice that relationships built on constant explanation are fragile. They require endless effort to maintain balance. But relationships grounded in silence, in mutual respect, in conscious distance, they endure. Because real love does not demand translation. It recognizes truth in its native form. Jung's concept of individuation echoes this perfectly. To become whole, one must differentiate from others without disconnecting from them. Wholeness is not isolation, it's conscious unity. Two souls aware of their boundaries, yet deeply connected through that awareness. So, you begin to live this truth in small ways. When someone misunderstands you, you smile gently and say, "I see it differently." No anger, no defense, just peace. When someone demands more explanation than you have the energy to give, you breathe and say, "This is where I stand." And then you let silence do what words cannot. That silence, once terrifying, now feels protective, like a soft wall made of air, transparent yet firm. It keeps your energy where it belongs, within you. Over time, this practice becomes less of an act and more of a state of being. You no longer have to remind yourself to pause, to stop, to trust. It becomes your nature, a quiet strength that moves through you effortlessly. The more you live it, the more you understand Jung's wisdom. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Your silence is consciousness in action. The moment you stop reacting automatically and begin responding deliberately. So tonight, as you sit in your own stillness, think of the two candles, glowing, steady, side by side, neither trying to outshine the other, each honoring the space that allows them both to burn. That space, that respectful, radiant distance, is love in its truest form. And in that realization, something inside you exhales. You no longer fear the silence. You understand it. And in understanding, you find the kind of peace that doesn't need to be explained at all. After practicing the silent protocol for a while, something unexpected begins to happen. The world around you shifts. The same people who once depended on your constant explanations, your warmth, your endless willingness to smooth things over, start to look at you differently. They say things like, "You've changed." And in a way, they're right. The rhythm of your relationships begins to alter. The conversations that used to stretch into hours now end quietly after a few sentences. The people who were accustomed to your detailed emotional translations seem confused by your brevity, even threatened by it. You notice the tension in their eyes, the subtle discomfort when you no longer rush to fill every pause. To them, your silence feels like distance. To you, it feels like breathing. Carl Jung warned that individuation, the process of becoming one's true self, would always disrupt the old patterns of connection. He wrote, The individual who is more unconscious of himself and therefore projects his dark side has an inferior relation to his environment. He has not yet found himself and therefore is unable to make a genuine relationship with others. When you begin to find yourself, those relationships built on unconscious patterns start to tremble. Because for the first time, you are no longer participating in the illusion that kept them stable. Before, your empathy functioned as glue, binding people together through your understanding, your tolerance, your effort. But now, as you pull that energy back into yourself, the cracks that were always there start to show. And it hurts. It hurts to realize that some connections existed not because of mutual understanding, but because of your labor. It hurts to watch familiar faces retreat when you stop doing the emotional work for both of you. There is fear in that realization. Fear of losing people. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of being alone. But Jung would tell you that this fear is not punishment, it is purification. There is no birth of consciousness without pain, he wrote. And this is that pain, the ache of transformation. You are no longer who you were, but the world has not yet learned how to meet who you are becoming. At first, you try to explain the change. You tell people you're not angry, just quieter. You try to assure them that you're still the same person. But the truth is, you're not. And you shouldn't be. The empath who once lived for understanding is becoming an individual who lives from authenticity. That shift is profound, and it can be unsettling for those who depended on your previous self. Because when your silence enters the space where your explanations used to be, it acts like a mirror. It reflects everything that was hidden, their projections, their avoidance, their unwillingness to listen. And people don't always like what they see. Some will accuse you of being distant, cold, unkind. Some will try to pull you back into your old role, the comforter, the fixer, the one who absorbs all tension and turns it into peace. But this time, you don't step back into that part. You stand still. You breathe. You let discomfort exist. Because you understand now that silence is not rejection. It is truth unspoken, yet still alive. This is what Jung meant when he said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. When you stop explaining, people are forced to face themselves, their reactions, their insecurities, their projections. Your silence becomes a kind of mirror that reveals what they would rather not see. And as painful as that is to witness, it is also liberating. Because now, every relationship in your life begins to show its real structure. Some grow stronger, the ones built on respect and self-awareness. Others fade, collapsing under the weight of imbalance. But here's the quiet truth. What remains is what's real. The ones who truly love you will not demand constant translation. They will not confuse your silence with absence. They will feel your presence even when you say nothing. The others, those who needed your over-explanation to feel secure, will drift away. Let them. Because as they leave, something else enters. Peace. It's strange at first, this new kind of peace. It feels wide and empty, like walking through a room after a long conversation. But slowly, you start to hear the faint hum beneath it, the sound of your own existence, free from performance. You realize that the silence you feared is not isolation, it's authenticity. Jung believed that individuation often begins with separation. You must step away from the collective, from the noise of others' expectations, before you can truly hear the voice of your own soul. He called it the loneliness of becoming. And in this loneliness, something extraordinary begins to take shape. You start to feel connected again, but differently. The connection no longer comes from pleasing others, but from being aligned with yourself. You notice that the fewer words you speak, the more meaningful your interactions become. The fewer explanations you give, the deeper your peace grows. Your energy changes, quieter, steadier, clearer, and people sense it. Some are drawn to it, others retreat. Both reactions are natural, because silence is a form of truth, and truth always rearranges what was built on illusion. It's important to remember that this phase, the unraveling of old relationships, is not a sign that you are losing love. It's a sign that you are moving closer to genuine love. As Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." What you are doing now is making your unconscious patterns conscious. You are stepping out of fate and into freedom. And yes, that freedom costs you something. Familiarity, comfort, the illusion of harmony. But what it gives in return is priceless. Real connection, self-respect, and peace that does not depend on understanding. You begin to see this transformation like a tide going out, taking with it the debris of what no longer serves you, leaving behind only what belongs. The world will keep saying, "You've changed," and you'll smile softly because you know the truth. You haven't changed. You've simply stopped performing the version of yourself that made others comfortable. You've stopped explaining your light to those committed to misunderstanding its warmth. And as you stand in this quiet space between loss and renewal, something deep within you whispers, not in words, but in knowing. When people leave, it's not proof that you are unlovable. It's proof that your soul is finally choosing what love truly means. Because only those who can meet you in silence will truly stay. And so, as your world rearranges itself, you discover something profound. Silence doesn't end connection. It refines it. And through that refinement, you begin to see who was never truly with you, and who, quietly, has been beside you all along. After the people who could not meet your silence have drifted away, a stillness settles in. At first, it feels like emptiness, a quiet so vast that even your thoughts echo when they move. There is a strange ache in it, the kind that feels like both loss and relief at once. But as the days pass, something subtle begins to unfold within that space. The ache softens, and you start to notice that beneath the loneliness lies something purer, something alive. Carl Jung called this sacred solitude. He believed that being alone is not a defect, but a stage of individuation, the process of returning to the center of one's own soul. He wrote, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. And now, you are learning to communicate not through words, but through presence. Solitude, in this sense, is not isolation. It is integration. It is not the absence of connection, but the restoration of your wholeness. For the first time in a long time, your energy is not scattered outward. It's gathering within you, quietly, patiently, like light collecting in the lens of a lighthouse before it turns to face the storm. That image, the lighthouse, is what your soul feels like now, still, steady, unmoved by the waves that crash around it. It does not chase the ships. It does not shout across the sea. It simply stands in its place and shines. The ships that need its light will find it. The ones that don't will pass by in the dark. There's a peace in that, a deep oceanic calm that grows stronger the longer you stay with it. At first, you might confuse it with loneliness because the world taught you that being alone means being incomplete. But Jung would remind you that wholeness can only be found in solitude. He wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And that privilege requires distance from noise, from distraction, from the constant pull to be understood." You begin to realize that this distance is not abandonment. It's alignment. Every time you choose silence over explanation, reflection over reaction, peace over proving, you are returning to yourself. And this returning feels sacred. You start to feel the pulse of life in simple things again. The sound of your own breathing, the rhythm of rain on glass, the quiet weight of your body resting fully in the present moment. What once felt empty now feels full. Full of presence, of clarity, of quiet love. In this sacred solitude, you no longer need to chase meaning. You begin to see that everything you were trying to explain, everything you were trying to make others understand, was really just a reflection of the part of you that longed to be seen by you. You were never waiting for someone else to hear you. You were waiting to finally listen to yourself. This is the transformation that solitude brings. Not the absence of love, but the purification of it. Because love, when stripped of dependence, becomes luminous. It expands from being a feeling directed toward others into something greater, an atmosphere, a way of being. Jung wrote about this in his reflections on individuation. Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration. That's what you're doing now. Integrating all the parts of yourself that were scattered by the need to please, to explain, to belong. You are no longer split between the world's expectations and your inner truth. You are becoming whole. One voice, one rhythm, one light. And yes, there are moments when it still feels heavy, when the quiet seems too wide and you miss the warmth of connection. But then you remember, even a lighthouse is surrounded by the dark sea, and yet it doesn't fear the darkness. It was built for it. You, too, were built for this stillness, for this moment of reconnection where nothing external defines your worth. There is a wisdom in this solitude that words cannot touch. It teaches you how to rest inside yourself without judgment, how to sit in the center of your being and simply exist without needing to prove, to fix, or to impress. And in that stillness, you begin to sense something divine, not outside you, but within. It is the quiet knowing that you were never truly alone. Every breath you take connects you to the vast rhythm of existence, to every soul that has ever paused, reflected, and healed. You start to understand that solitude is not the absence of connection. It's the return to the most essential connection of all, the one between you and your own consciousness. Jung once wrote, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." And in this solitude, you are waking up. You are awakening to the fullness of your own being. The beauty that exists, not because someone else recognizes it, but because it is. The wind outside moves softly. You feel it through the open window, carrying the scent of rain and the hush of distance. You breathe it in and realize that this moment, quiet, unremarkable, infinite, is enough. In this solitude, you haven't lost anyone. You've simply stopped losing yourself. And that realization brings a peace so deep, it feels like prayer. You can feel your heart beat slow, your breath deepen, the edges of your mind soften. Everything unnecessary fades, and what remains is simple, steady presence. No roles, no explanations, just being. It's here, in this sacred solitude, that you begin to understand what wholeness truly means. It is not perfection, it is not constant happiness. It is the quiet harmony between shadow and light, the recognition that both belong. As the final thought of the day drifts away, you rest in this truth. You do not need to seek yourself anymore. You have arrived. And perhaps that's what Jung was pointing toward all along. Not escape from the world, but union with the self. So now, as your breathing slows and the world outside fades into stillness, you let the words dissolve, leaving only awareness behind. The storm has passed. The lighthouse stands, and in its quiet glow, you are home. After the stillness of sacred solitude settles deep within, something begins to change once more, not outwardly, but inside. The peace you found starts to tremble slightly, like calm water darkening beneath an oncoming storm. It isn't chaos returning, it's transformation beginning. Carl Jung, drawing from alchemical symbolism, called this stage nigredo, the blackening. It is the first phase of psychological alchemy, where the soul dissolves its old form so that something purer can emerge. He described it as the dark night of the soul, a descent not into despair, but into truth. This darkness doesn't come to punish you. It comes to purify you. At first, it feels like fear. A quiet unease begins to move through your chest. And the old sense of identity, the self you build through effort, empathy, and explanation, starts to feel fragile, even unreal. You can almost sense it peeling away, like old paint from a wall that has weathered too many storms. The dissolution of the old self is not gentle. It pulls at everything you've clung to. Your ideas of who you are, what love should be, what purpose means. It can feel as if everything solid is melting. But this is exactly what Nigredo demands, that the false structures dissolve so the real can be revealed. Jung once wrote, "In each of us, there is another whom we do not know." The process of Nigredo is how that hidden self begins to surface. It starts as darkness, the feeling of not knowing who you are without your patterns, your roles, your noise. It's disorienting, like walking through fog. You reach for the familiar and find it gone. You try to think your way out, but thought itself feels heavy, like smoke. And yet, if you listen closely beneath the fear, there's a strange kind of grace in this unraveling. Because for the first time, you are no longer trying to be anything. You are simply letting yourself fall apart, gently, consciously, the way autumn leaves release from their branches without resistance. There's a quiet wisdom in decay. In alchemy, the blackening was not seen as death, but as the necessary stage before rebirth. The matter must decompose before it can be reformed into something higher. Jung used this as a metaphor for psychological growth. the death of ego illusions, the surrender of false identities. He said, "There's no coming to consciousness without pain. And this pain, though silent, has texture. It feels like emptiness, vast and unfamiliar. It feels like losing your reflection after a lifetime of staring into mirrors that told you who you were. At moments, you may feel fear, not sharp, but hollow. You might wake with a sense of disconnection, as if you're floating slightly outside your own life. Nothing is wrong, yet nothing feels the same. This is the threshold. The soul is clearing space. You begin to notice that even the fear carries a softness now, as though the edges of your suffering have been sanded down by time. You breathe slower, deeper, and the air feels thick but clean, like rain after fire. The darkness, it turns out, is not empty at all. It's fertile. You start to see faint glimmers in it, memories, symbols, images arising from the unconscious. They don't come with explanations, only sensations, a color, a face, a word that feels ancient. Jung called these archetypal fragments pieces of your deeper psyche revealing themselves once the surface self has been stripped away. It's in this stage that many people feel lost. But Jung would say, you are not lost, you are being found. He compared it to the myth of the sun setting into the underworld each night to be reborn at dawn. The light doesn't vanish, it only descends to renew itself. So you let yourself descend. You breathe into the darkness instead of fighting it. You begin to understand that this blackening, this dissolution, is not the end of your peace, but it's deepening. It is peace maturing, shedding innocence for wisdom. Imagine ashes drifting in the air, falling quietly after a long fire. They settle on the ground softly, weightless, like surrender. That's what this feels like. Fear dissolving into acceptance, control melting into trust. In Psychology and Alchemy, Jung wrote, "The experience of the self is always a defeat for the ego." That's what Nigredo is. The ego's gentle defeat. The recognition that all your striving, your endless effort to manage, explain, or be understood was only the outer shell. Beneath it lies something truer, raw, unadorned, vast. You start to feel that vastness now, not as emptiness, but as space. Space to breathe, to feel, to exist, without trying to define it. The darkness no longer feels like an enemy. It becomes a companion, a deep, ancient presence that whispers, "Rest, stop searching, let it fall apart." You listen. The more you surrender, the lighter it becomes. The fear loosens. The sadness softens. The emptiness begins to shimmer faintly, like dust catching light. You understand now what Jung meant when he said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This is the consciousness being born, not by escaping darkness, but by walking calmly through it. Every breath becomes slower now. The world outside fades into background hums, a distant breeze, the faint rustle of life continuing. You feel as if you are standing in the quiet center of a vast universe, alone but not lonely, emptied yet full of unseen meaning. The blackening is doing its work. It is dissolving the unnecessary, clearing the fog between your soul and the truth it has always known. That you are not what you've lost, nor what you've built, but what remains when everything else falls away. This realization doesn't come as a thought. It comes as a feeling, a low warmth in the chest, a calm pulse, a quiet exhale. And with that breath, the fear releases. The ashes settle. The darkness ceases to feel heavy. It becomes a soft cloak, not blinding, but protective. You understand now that darkness was never the opposite of light. It was the soil that made light possible. Your old self, the one who tried, explained, gave, and reached, has finally dissolved into something purer. In the quiet, you can almost hear the wind outside your own awareness, gentle, rhythmic, like a whisper from something greater. Bong toi khong, jen je trung pat, ma je tan tai. Darkness does not come to punish, but to purify. And as that truth settles into you, you breathe once more, slower, deeper, softer. The music fades into the sound of wind. The air feels lighter, and somewhere deep inside, a new kind of dawn is quietly preparing to rise. Out of the stillness of Negredo, a faint shimmer begins to appear, like the first trace of dawn reflected on dark water. The blackness no longer feels endless. It begins to soften, to glow from within. The air feels cleaner now, the heaviness replaced by something delicate, like light filtering through fog. This is what alchemists called albedo, the whitening. It is the stage where the soul, having been stripped bare, begins to clarify. The chaos of the old identity dissolves, and in its place arises a subtle awareness, pure, tender, alive. Carl Jung described albedo as the moment of purification following dissolution. It is when the unconscious begins to align with consciousness, when clarity returns after the storm of transformation. He wrote, "In the alchemical process, the whitening corresponds to illumination, a dawning awareness of the self. It feels like breathing after a long submersion. Each inhale reaches deeper. Each exhale releases more of what no longer belongs. Through this gentle light, you start to see your boundaries clearly, not as walls, but as contours of truth. You understand where you end and where the world begins. And that recognition doesn't isolate you, it frees you. For the first time, compassion and self-respect coexist. You realize that to love purely, you must remain whole. Jung would call this the integration of opposites, the uniting of feeling and thought, softness and strength, shadow and light. You are no longer dissolving, you are crystallizing. The light that fills this phase is not blinding. It's soft, almost maternal. A quiet reassurance that everything that was dark was never truly wrong, only unacknowledged. The blackness you once feared becomes the soil from which this clarity grows. As Jung wrote, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. You've made the darkness conscious, and now light emerges naturally, without force. This illumination brings understanding, but not the kind that shouts. It whispers. It feels like forgiveness. You begin to see your past self, the one who over-explained, overgave, over-cared, not as weak, but as sacred. That person was simply trying to find balance. You feel gratitude toward your former self for carrying you through the blackening. Every mistake, every heartbreak, every exhaustion was part of the purification. In the quiet glow of albedo, your emotions no longer feel chaotic. They move with rhythm, like gentle waves returning to the shore. You are learning that peace is not the absence of feeling. It is the ability to let feelings flow without drowning in them. Then, as time unfolds, or rather deepens, another warmth begins to rise beneath the white light. It starts subtly, like heat beneath snow. The light that once soothed now begins to burn gently, not as destruction, but as renewal. This is rubedo, the reddening, the final stage of the alchemical process. In rubedo, the purified soul becomes embodied again. Spirit and matter, light and flesh, awareness and passion reunite. The alchemists called it the marriage of the Red King and the White Queen, the union of opposites that creates wholeness. Jung saw rubedo as the culmination of individuation, the moment when inner awareness becomes active life. He described it as the integration of the self with the world. This stage is vibrant. It feels like warmth returning to your hands after the cold, or like sunlight touching the skin of water that has been still for too long. The soul, once stripped bare, now begins to rebuild, not as it was, but as it was always meant to be. You find that you can act again, speak again, love again, but this time from presence, not from need. The image of metal melting captures it perfectly. Under the fire of transformation, the rigid self liquefies, and from that molten truth, a new substance forms, stronger, more luminous, with the red-gold hue of something that has been both burned and blessed. You are that metal. The process has tempered you, softened your surface, strengthened your core. You are no longer brittle, no longer afraid of breaking. You are flexible yet firm, radiant yet grounded. Jung called this synthesis the realization of the self, the alignment of consciousness with the total psyche. It is the state where opposites cease to battle and begin to dance. And as this realization unfolds, love begins to return. Not the anxious, seeking kind, but a quiet, steady love that flows outward because it overflows from within. It's a love that doesn't cling or explain. It simply shines, like gold reflecting light without effort. You begin to see others through this new clarity. Their flaws no longer feel like threats, and their pain no longer pulls you under. Compassion no longer costs you yourself. In this red gold warmth, you realize that loving others and protecting your boundaries are no longer opposites. They are expressions of the same truth. Awareness. To love deeply now means to love consciously, without losing form, without dissolving into someone else's storm. This is what Jung meant when he said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." Because accepting yourself completely means living from the wholeness that once felt impossible. The harmony between shadow and light, intellect and instinct, stillness and passion. As rubedo deepens, your very being feels balanced, soft where it needs to bend, firm where it must hold. You no longer see your sensitivity as weakness or your silence as distance. They are both expressions of the same strength. Everything within you now feels integrated. The empath and the boundary, the giver and the guardian, the dreamer and the doer. And with that integration comes a kind of peace that feels alive, not passive, not detached, but quietly radiant. You breathe and your breath carries warmth. You speak and your words carry truth. You rest and even your stillness feels like light. This is what it means to reach the reddening, to live not as a fragment, but as a fusion. The philosopher's stone, the alchemist's dream, the soul's ultimate goal, all of it was never about turning metal into gold. It was about turning suffering into awareness and awareness into love. Now, the light within you is not fragile. It glows from the same source as the fire that once burned you. And as this realization settles, the heart expands. It beats not from longing, but from presence. Calm, complete, compassionate in this soft culmination. There's nothing left to chase, nothing left to fix. Only this truth remains, quiet, steady, eternal. Now, You can love others without losing yourself. The light of rubedo lingers, warm, complete, alive, but beneath that gold hue, something quieter begins to stir. A soft pulse of remembrance. The soul, now whole, looks back at everything it has endured, and for the first time, it does not recoil. It bows, because now pain is no longer an enemy. It has become a teacher. Carl Jung once wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." He believed that true transformation requires conscious suffering, the ability to face pain not as a punishment, but as a passage. This kind of suffering is not chaotic or blind. It is illuminated from within. It asks nothing more than your presence, not your resistance, not your analysis, only your willingness to stay. It is the moment when you realize that what once broke you did not end you. It opened you. The blackness of negredo, the clarity of albedo, the warmth of rubedo, they all converge here, forming a kind of sacred awareness. You begin to see the architecture of your suffering, how every wound had purpose, how every collapse was an initiation. The mind quiets, the body loosens, breath deepens. Outside, it's as if the world mirrors your state. The sky grows pale, and through the faint mist, sunlight begins to thread its way in. Slow, gentle, deliberate. It does not rush to conquer the fog. It glides through it, illuminating it from the inside. That is how conscious suffering feels. It doesn't demand escape. It doesn't scream for meaning. It allows itself to exist, aware, soft, sacred. This is the difference Jung spoke of between mere pain and conscious pain. Pain resisted creates bitterness. Pain accepted creates depth. One does not heal by avoiding suffering, but by experiencing it to its fullest extent, Jung reminded us. And in this fullness, there is grace. You start to understand that every breakdown was actually a breakthrough disguised in shadow. Every time you thought you were being destroyed, you were being reshaped. The process was not cruelty, it was refinement. The alchemist said that gold is purified only by fire, not by comfort. Likewise, the soul shines brightest when it has endured the heat of awareness. You have become that gold. The difference now is not that pain has disappeared. It is that you see it clearly. You understand its place in the sacred cycle of becoming. Pain enters, transforms, and leaves behind light. The same way dawn follows night, even when the world still holds its breath in grey, your awareness begins to see that sorrow and awakening are inseparable companions. There is a tenderness in this understanding. You no longer fight your memories. You no longer label experiences as mistakes or failures. You simply observe, like watching clouds drift across the horizon of your own life. And somewhere deep inside, gratitude begins to bloom. Gratitude not just for the joy, but for the very moments that nearly broke you. Because now you know they were never meant to destroy. They were meant to open the gate. Jung often spoke of enantiodromia, the law of opposites, where everything, when pushed to its extreme, turns into its opposite. Pain, when fully faced, turns into wisdom. Fear, when fully understood, turns into strength. Suffering, when made conscious, turns into love. This truth humbles you. It softens you. You remember how you once tried to run from discomfort, how you spoke too much to fill the silence, gave too much to avoid being alone, worked too hard to escape your own stillness. And now, that same stillness feels like home, because through suffering, you have learned to sit with what is, This is the quiet power Jung called individuation, the process by which the human soul becomes itself. He wrote, "The way to wholeness is made up, unfortunately, of fateful detours and wrong turnings." You see now that even your detours had direction. The past no longer feels heavy. It feels like soil, rich, dark, full of the nutrients that allowed your awareness to grow. The self that once begged for answers now rests in acceptance. The heart that once sought safety in others now finds peace within itself. And this peace is not naive. It carries the memory of every ache you've survived. It's the kind of peace that doesn't need to forget in order to forgive. You can feel it in your breath. Each inhale, a quiet thank you. Each exhale, a gentle release. The sun outside climbs higher now, spilling light through the mist. It does not erase the fog. It reveals its beauty. The air shimmers softly, like breath made visible. You realize that pain was never separate from light. It was light in another form, dense and unprocessed. Once acknowledged, it became translucent. And in that transparency, you begin to see life differently. There is no longer a sharp line between joy and sorrow, between loss and love. They are all part of the same current, flowing, interdependent, eternal. What once felt like suffering now feels like participation, as if every experience, pleasant or painful, was part of a vast design weaving you toward understanding. You begin to feel a kind of reverence, not for the suffering itself, but for the consciousness it brought forth. You whisper to yourself softly, "You have suffered, but now you know why." And that knowing changes everything. The world seems lighter now, not because it has changed, but because your perception has. The same challenges, the same uncertainties, the same human fragility, yet now they glimmer with meaning. This is conscious suffering's final gift, clarity wrapped in tenderness. It doesn't offer escape, it offers comprehension. It doesn't promise endless happiness, it promises authenticity. As Jung once said, even a happy life cannot be without a measure of darkness. And the word happy would lose its meaning if it were not balanced by sadness. You understand now that to be human is to hold both, light and dark, pain and peace, without trying to choose one over the other. So you stop striving to erase your suffering. Instead, you let it rest like a stone at the bottom of a clear river. The water flows around it gently, unresisting, and with every breath, that stone glows softer, less a weight, more a memory. The sun now fully rises. Light passes through the mist, through your open eyes, through the quiet rhythm of your being. The past feels distant, but not gone. It's been integrated. Every wound has turned to wisdom, every scar to softness, and in the slow sunrise of the soul, a simple truth settles inside. Conscious suffering was never the end of your story. It was the beginning of your freedom. As the light of conscious suffering settles into calm awareness, a sense of completion begins to unfold, not as triumph, but as peace. The long journey inward, through confusion, exhaustion, darkness, and awakening, has not delivered a destination. It has revealed something deeper, the quiet beauty of simply being. The transformation feels almost invisible. No fireworks, no revelation shouted from the mountaintop. Only a steady rhythm, a breathing that feels whole, effortless, true. Carl Jung wrote, "The goal of the process of individuation is not perfection, but wholeness." That is the essence of this final chapter. To be whole is not to have escaped pain or conquered the self, but to have integrated all that you are. The shadow and the light, the longing and the stillness, the voice that once explained and the soul that now listens. The journey has taken you from the one who explained everything to be understood to the one who stays silent and understands themselves. From overextension to integration, from noise to presence. Now everything feels slower, softer. The light has no edges. It touches gently, filling spaces that once echoed with effort. There is nothing left to prove, nothing left to chase. The struggle to be seen, to be accepted, to be explained, it has dissolved into quiet acceptance, not of the world, but of yourself. In this final stage of becoming, even words begin to thin. Thought gives way to awareness. Awareness gives way to being. This is what Jung called the self, not the ego that seeks, but the essence that simply is. He described it as the totality of the whole psyche, the center that connects consciousness and the unconscious, the visible and the unseen. To touch that center is to discover a peace that does not depend on circumstance. It is the kind of peace that simply breathes with existence, quiet, continuous, luminous. The image that arises is simple. A person sitting near a window as dawn breaks, eyes half closed, not thinking, not naming, just being. The air holds the scent of morning, the faint hum of life continuing. That is what wholeness feels like. A return not to something new, but to something timeless. Every lesson, every loss, every silence, every awakening, they now rest together inside you, not as contradictions, but as harmony. The empath who once carried the emotions of others now carries compassion without burden. The voice that once sought to explain now speaks only when truth calls for it. The heart that once feared loneliness now feels the sacred intimacy of solitude. In the words of Jung, only in our creative acts do we step forth into the light and see ourselves whole and complete. That creative act is your life itself, the slow, continuous art of becoming. And here, at the end of the path, the paradox unfolds. You were never meant to arrive. Every stage, every pain, every silence, they were not obstacles, but the rhythm of your evolution. The process itself was the destination. You will never arrive, and that is how you become. The words echo softly, like a lullaby. They do not instruct, they soothe. They do not demand, they release. This truth no longer frightens you. It frees you. To never arrive means to remain open to the mystery, the movement, the unfolding of each breath. It means you no longer need to grasp at meaning. Meaning flows through you like air through leaves. It means you can rest, finally, in the pulse of existence itself. The sun has risen now. The light that once cut sharply through shadow has softened into a golden haze. It moves gently through the room, across your hands, your breath, your stillness. You sit within it, part of it, aware that you are both the observer and the light observed. This is wholeness. Not a final answer, but a sacred balance. The dance between knowing and not knowing, speaking and listening, giving and being. And in this balance, you find love, not as a feeling directed outward, but as the quiet hum of life itself moving through you. There is tenderness in everything now. Even the pain that once consumed you has become part of this tenderness. It exists within you like a note within a chord, essential to the harmony, inseparable from the beauty. You begin to understand that nothing was ever wasted. Not a single tear, not a single silence. Every moment you thought you were breaking, you were becoming. The world outside, the inner world within. They mirror each other now. No division, no conflict, just a single continuous movement of life. Expansion, contraction, stillness, release. Jung's final wisdom comes alive here. In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order. And as those words linger, you feel that order within you. Subtle, unspoken, alive. The mind no longer reaches. The heart no longer clings. Everything that once needed explanation now dissolves into breath. So the voice, once analytical and searching, now becomes a whisper, a soft closing of the circle, a gentle reminder to rest. Let every explanation fall away. Let every word return to silence. Let every thought loosen its grip and drift into stillness. All that remains is breath, light, and peace, wrapping around you like a warm dusk. The journey is complete, but it never ends. It flows, breathes, becomes. The voice fades now, softer with each word. Let every explanation fall away. Let only your breath remain. Let the quiet light hold you. Sleep, for this stillness, this silence is you. And as the final note dissolves into quiet, you are left with the most sacred realization of all. There was never a point of arrival, only the ongoing beauty of becoming. In the quiet after the journey, everything feels weightless. The noise that once filled your mind has faded into a soft hum, the heartbeat of existence itself. You have walked through the darkness and the light, through giving and letting go, through silence and self-discovery. And now, there's nothing left to fix, nothing left to explain. The stillness around you no longer feels empty. It feels alive. Each breath drifts slowly, like ripples across a calm lake. The air holds the faint scent of peace, the kind that comes not from answers, but from understanding. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." You have become that, not by force, not by perfection, but by surrender, by allowing yourself to feel, to break, to heal, and to rest. The world outside continues to turn, but inside, time seems to dissolve. There is only breath, warmth, and the quiet rhythm of your own being. Every sound softens, every thought loosens, every part of you begins to float. Let the weight of words fall away. Let the day release its hold. Let this gentle darkness cradle you. For in this silence, you are whole. And in this wholeness, you are home. Now take a deep breath and let yourself drift into the calm. Good night.